Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be breaking down and reviewing The Last of Us Episode 6 titled Kin. Now, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I would love to hear what you guys thought about this episode, so leave a like and drop a comment down below and tell me your thoughts. With that being said, let's get right into it. At the beginning of this episode, we get an abrupt retelling of the events that ended the last episode with the ending of Sam and Henry's story. From this point, we flash forward a couple months similar to the game. There is a time jump, but we're not really sure how long it is. Maybe a couple days, maybe a month, who knows. We actually switch perspectives from Ellie and Joel to this random family that we haven't met before and who aren't actually canon in the game. Joel and Ellie have actually taken over this lady's house and they're holding them kind of hostage in order to get information on how to get to Jackson so Tommy and Joel can meet up again. Now, this episode was full of Easter eggs, and I'm going to try and talk about as many as I can, but the first one happens in this scene. In the game, Joel uses this really crucial, critical technique where he tells someone to point at a map and tells their partner to point at a map, and if they're not pointing at the same spot, well, it's bad news for them, but he actually uses it here without the violence, tells the man to point at the map the same spot that his wife pointed at, and it better be the same. Now, if you've played the games, you know that this is a technique that Joel uses multiple times, and it was really cool seeing him use it for the first time in front of Ellie here. The couple that they're sort of interrogating seem to kind of be relaxed almost. They're living this pretty happy life, kind of like Bill and Frank in their secluded own little farm area. And farms are actually pretty important in this episode. We're going to talk about that later. Now, as they're leaving the farm, Joel kind of leans on one of the posts, and I thought for a second he was going to have a heart attack. I then thought, okay, are they going to change up the way that Joel gets injured in the game? Because spoiler alert, for the end of the episode, he does get hurt in a way that is pretty similar to what happens in the source material, but here I thought they were going to switch it up and give him sort of a heart attack so he didn't actually get stabbed, but he does. Now, Joel has these sort of attacks multiple times throughout the episode, and it's not till later on that we figure out why he's having these sort of heart aches, both physically and metaphorically. Throughout this whole journey of them getting there, Ellie drops all of these lines that if you've played the game, once again, you will definitely recognize. Now, these may be small moments, but I think they're super critical into understanding how Joel and Ellie's relationship develops. It's not something where one big event happens and then they're best buddies for life. It's kind of something that builds up over time, and Joel is slowly opening up more and more to her. Now, before they actually get to Jackson, they stop and have a camp out at night. This is something we've never seen before, and we've actually only seen it in concept images for The Last of Us Part 1. It's something that Neil Druckmann said they couldn't do in the game, but they're super glad that they got to do it here. Ellie and Joel are surrounding themselves with a campfire, having a nice meal, when all of a sudden they start talking about a little bit more serious things, but still kind of having this lighthearted banter. Joel and Ellie ask each other what they would want to be if there wasn't an outbreak or an infection. Once again, it goes in line with the source material and gives us a hint towards Ellie's future and things that happen on in the future. She points up at the moon and tells Joel that she always wanted to be an astronaut and go up into space. Now, knowing what happens in the future and the events that transpire later on in this epic story, you realize that this is a starting moment for Joel's actions later on in the series, which I hope they touch on in part 2, and I hope they do that scene so great. I can just imagine it. Ellie actually tells Joel at this moment that she tried to save Sam's life with her blood, and Joel doesn't really know how to respond to this. Ellie asks Joel if the Fireflies can seriously help humanity and make a vaccine, and Joel says, yeah, they can probably do it. I have faith in them. There were just so many good moments between Joel and Ellie this episode. I feel like it was kind of a repeat of episode 4, but amplified because they know each other a little bit more and they've been together for much longer. Joel tells Ellie that if there wasn't an outbreak, he would want to settle down somewhere really nice and have a farm, and Ellie asks, what would you have on the farm? And he says sheep. Now, for a first-time viewer, this means absolutely nothing, but later on, trust me, this means way more than it leads on. Now, here we kind of have a parallel moment that mimics the events of an earlier episode where we see Joel and Ellie going to rest, and Ellie asks what watch she should take. Joel says, no, I will take watch for both shifts. You get some sleep. And of course, Joel is tired, he's exhausted, and he's going through this kind of emotional trauma / emotional reset in his life that he wasn't expecting, which they don't really touch on it just yet. They do later on in the episode, but Ellie actually ends up taking watch on both shifts, and Joel wakes up kind of shocked at the fact that he fell asleep and let his guard down. After a while, they finally make their way to the dam, and they're surrounded by a bunch of people. Now, at first, I thought these were going to be the hunters / ravagers / cannibals that we're going to maybe meet later on in the episode, but it turns out these are the people from Jackson. They interrogate Joel and Ellie, and they actually have a guard dog to sniff out people who are infected. Joel is super worried at this moment that Ellie is going to set off the dog and the dog's going to tear her apart, but luckily she's not infected and there's no remnants of the infection, so nothing happens. Joel tells them that he's looking for his brother, and a woman pulls her mask down and says, "What's your name?" We then find out that this character is Maria, and we find out who Maria is just a little bit later on. Ellie and Joel are taken back to Jackson, and we finally get the reunion between him and Tommy, and it was so wonderful. I actually prefer the reunion in the show over the reunion in the game. We got more drawn out scenes of emotions between them two, and we got a little bit more slower paced exposition. Now when they enter Jackson, I was just looking around for everything I could find that could relate to anything in the games, and of course if we look to our right, we saw the Tipsy Bison, which is a setting that we're going to see multiple times throughout this episode and plays a vital role in the story. Maybe not in this season, but it will in season 2. We see some kids throwing snowballs, and this is actually reminiscent of a scene at the beginning of Last of Us Part 2 where it's teaching you how to play the game and Ellie has to throw snowballs at the kids. We then find out that Maria, the girl who corralled Ellie and Joel out in the woods, is actually Tommy's wife. Now this puts Tommy in sort of a tough position because Joel's plan here is to relay Ellie off to Tommy and make him take care of her and take her to where she needs to go. Ellie and Joel are sort of getting a tour of the place similar to how it is in the game, but at this point, there's not going to be any hunters or raiders that come in and screw everything up like the game, because that's sort of a game element. You know, we don't really need that here. It kind of disrupts the flow, the pacing, and the peace of the place. Maria takes them to the stables where we meet a young horse named Shimmer, and Shimmer is a main character-ish kind of in the second game. And I'm not going to spoil anything from the second game, but just know that these characters that they're showing us in the first season are definitely going to be more important later on as the series progresses. After a while, we see Tommy and Joel kind of connect once again with each other, and we get the scene where Joel is trying to tell Tommy what's going on, why are you taking care of this girl, and what does this mean? Tommy says, look, I know you have some issues with your past, and no one can understand what you went through, but you can't just dump things on me because I have a family and I have a life now that I don't want to give up. I've started over for myself. We also get a lot of explanation here as to how Tommy and Joel survived in these past years. They kind of bring it up in the game, but here we realize they killed a lot of innocent people as raiders and hunters. Jackson is a fresh start for Tommy and can be a fresh start for Ellie and Joel as well, but Joel doesn't want to attach himself to Ellie any more than he has because he is actually scared of having someone to love, whereas Ellie is the complete opposite and she is scared of not having anyone at all. Joel storms out, he's mad at Tommy for not accepting this, and he sees kind of this premonition of Sarah. It's not really a premonition, it's someone who looks similar to his daughter, and he's looking at basically what he could have had in his life had things gone right, and he starts to have that chest pain again. At this point, you realize, okay, maybe he's not having a heart attack, maybe these are panic-induced stress attacks that he's going to experience until he confronts his trauma. We then swap over to Ellie and Maria having a conversation, and we get a scene that we didn't get to see at all in the game. Ellie sees this sort of shrine on the fireplace of Tommy and Maria's home, and she's wondering who these two people are. And of course we find out that Maria had a child before, but she only had one, even though there were two names on the memorial. Of course, the other name on the memorial is Sarah, and Maria tells Ellie that actually Joel had a daughter who passed away. And this is the moment where Ellie herself realizes why Joel is acting the way he is and why he's so afraid to connect with her. I thought this was great because this is some exposition that we needed in the game a little bit more, because we don't really find out in the game why Ellie knows that Sarah existed, but here we get it more fleshed out. We actually get some great moments between Maria and Ellie, and we find out how strong Ellie is as a person and how she really thinks about things, and she's actually really, really intelligent when it comes to talking to people and figuring things out. I thought this was really cool. Later on, we get this scene where Joel and Tommy are talking about how Ellie is immune and how she means so much, but Joel can't do it because he can't risk getting attached anymore. And we get a beautifully emotional performance from Pedro Pascal here, and this was the really, really, really important scene that needed to sell me as him being Joel. And Joel doesn't really show too much emotion in the games, but this adds another layer to his character that I was really fond of. Joel basically tells Tommy, I freeze up. I can't afford to be attached to another person because I don't want to lose anyone else. I have to be alone. I can't do this. He's unbelievably desperate to get rid of this girl, not because he doesn't care for her, but because he does. Now, after this in the game, Ellie actually runs away because she overhears the conversation, and you have to fight a bunch of guys, find Ellie, and then you find her in this abandoned house. Here, she just overhears the conversation, and we're able to cut right to the chase, where one of the most iconic scenes happens. In this scene, Ellie and Joel confront each other, and Joel wonders why Ellie is being so standoffish and so upset, and it's because Joel is leaving her. They changed up a couple lines from the game, but I thought it worked fine and that it stands alone as its own thing. Joel basically tells Ellie that she would be better off with Tommy, but Ellie doesn't want to leave Joel because she would be more scared with anyone else. She wants him because he has cared for her, and she can't stand the thought of losing somebody else, while Joel can't stand the thought of losing anyone else, so he doesn't want anything to do with her, but she wants everything to do with him. It's this really cool yin and yang moment where we see these characters want the same thing, but kind of going about it in different ways. I absolutely love this scene in the game, and I'm not sure if I feel the same exact way about it in the show, but it kind of gives off the same effect. It's hard to kind of put myself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't know the story already. I find myself week after week expecting things to happen rather than wondering what's going to happen, but here they're kind of shaking things up, and I feel like this episode takes the source material and riffs off of it a little bit more than the other episodes have. Sort of like how episode 3 expands on a story that didn't even exist in the game, this kind of takes what does exist in the game and stretches it out even more. Ellie hits Joel with the heartbreaking line, "I'm not her, you know," and Joel kind of says, What are you talking about?" Ellie says, "Sarah, I'm not your daughter, I'm not Sarah." Ellie tells Joel that she has lost people too, and Joel tells her that she has no idea what loss is. Ellie refutes this by saying everyone she's loved or cared about has died or left her except for him, and it's about to be him too. She's about to lose him as well. And Joel at this point tries to cement his position by saying, "You're right, you're not my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad. And in the morning, we're going our separate ways." Now in the game after this, you have to fight a bunch of guys and kind of get to a safe point before the next scene happens. Here, Joel kind of takes the night to reflect on what he's done and what he's said, and the next morning, he ends up changing his mind. Ellie is ready to leave, she's ready to go with Tommy, but Joel already has the horse saddled up and ready to go, and she wants to go with him, and he wants to go with her. And you know, the scenes between them being in Jackson and at the university, we're getting more and more moments between Joel and Ellie that are super important to the foundation of the relationship, and at this point, Joel has accepted the fact that Ellie is no longer a piece of cargo. Sure, he's going to continue the mission and get her where she needs to go, but he's not doing it for the reward, he's doing it for her protection, and he cares about her, and he's showing it. They get to the university and we see the monkeys who were in the game, and they actually speed up this section, which kind of takes a while in the game, and they consolidate it to a really, really quick yet impactful scene. In the game, you hunt all of these people and then bad things happen. The bad things still happen in the show, but they do it in much more of a concise manner. Which again, you have a video game that's designed to be played. This is a show that's designed to be watched, entertaining, in a much shorter attention span than it would be if you're actually playing it. They find out that the Fireflies have actually left, and they've abandoned all of their stuff here and have moved to another zone. On their way out, they see that there are a couple of raiders nearby. They're trying to sneak out, and they actually get to their horse, and all of a sudden, this guy pops up from behind Joel because he's kind of hard of hearing. He didn't see him coming. They have a tussle, and Joel deals with him by choking him out, but we realize that when this was happening, Joel actually got stabbed. Now, he does get stabbed in the game, but he actually falls on a piece of rebar from fighting someone. In the show, he actually gets stabbed by the guy he was fighting. He's losing tons of blood, and we see Ellie get him on the horse, and they get out of there and go where they need to go. They're trying to get out of the area, and Joel falls off the horse and passes out, and then the episode cuts. This is the end. No spoilers to what happens next, but the next episode that's coming out on Sunday will actually reflect the DLC of the first game, which is called Left Behind, and the episode is actually called Left Behind as well. This will focus more on Ellie's past and who Ellie cared for, and will really give us the good moments of character development that we need from her since we've had it with Joel. It's going to be a long couple weeks to find out what happens, and if Joel actually does survive, who knows? But I think new fans and old fans alike of this series are in for one hell of a treat for the next 3 weeks in the last 3 episodes. I can't believe that it's almost over already. I want it to keep on going. I'm enjoying making these videos every week, and I'm enjoying waiting and watching episodes every Sunday night. Now, I've held this off to the end, but there are so many Easter eggs in this episode. And hands down, the #1 Easter egg had to be the possible sighting of Dina. Dina is such a huge character in part 2, and we actually get a brief glimpse of her and the actress playing her when they're in Jackson and when Ellie is sitting at the lunch table. You can totally tell it's Dina just by the single ponytail and kind of how she's stalking Ellie in a way. You know, Madison and I, when we saw this, we both said, Dina! We knew exactly who it was, and it was so cool that we realized they're going to do what they do in the games, and we know what's coming. And I don't know, it's just like, imagine if you read a book before watching a show or reading a book before watching a movie, when you know that these certain characters are super important, but you don't know how they're going to play it off yet. That's kind of how I felt when we saw Dina, which it might not be Dina, but it's Dina. I promise it's Dina. I'm not going to spoil anything about who she is or what her relationship is to Ellie, Joel, etc., but just know that she is super, super important. It feels like they're setting the stage for season 2, and this episode definitely did that the most. If you're a fan of the games, you realize that the last episode could also have some cameos of potential main characters for season 2, but we'll have to wait and see if those people actually pop up. This episode did give me some hope that we're going to see these characters though. While not the most action-packed, intense episode of all, this one really got to me on an emotional level and really helped me develop my attachment towards Joel and Pedro Pascal's performance as Joel. It's different than the game, totally. It's definitely different. But again, we get moments that we haven't seen in the game, and I think that's the most important thing that this show has done. It has expanded the universe not on a grand scheme level, but really a down-to-earth level. We're getting more emotional attachment to characters that we knew and cared about, but now we care about them even more. And we're also getting introduced to characters who we haven't met. I'm really curious to see how they tackle next week's episode of Left Behind. It's a really important story to Ellie's background, and I really hope they knock it out of the park. I know they will, because every episode so far has just been banger after banger. Please let me know what you guys thought of this episode down below. I'm loving reading your guys' comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. We're on the road to 100 subscribers now, and we're almost at 60. I can't believe it. I'll give this episode maybe an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. I thought it did a lot of great things. There were some changes, kind of like the house scene, that weren't my favorite. I kind of preferred the game, but it still got the point across, and it still stands on its own as its own special thing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.